Boxing into the cracks, into the crevices. We're going to discuss all things club boxing, the good, the bad, the ugly, the. I won't even go there, Tim. I'll let you tell us all about that. But if that's what you're here for, you want to hear about a fireworks show that lit the ring on fire, this is the spot for you. And if that's not what you're here for, that's okay. There are plenty of podcasts out there. Go check out one of those other ones. Message Tim, follow him on Twitter, message him, ask him which podcast should I listen to. He'll give you the recommendations. But if you're up for the wild world of club boxing, that is where Tim is a master. So let me introduce him. I've mentioned him. This is a TC Boxing Hall of Famer. He really is the most reliable source for results on the club scene. He is really like the champion for all the little guys in boxing that are trying to make it. And I don't mean little as in physically, but little as in not on TV, regularly. Tim Boxeo, how's it going? How was your weekend?
Good. It's going good, Angelo. It was a really slow boxing weekend all around the world and in club boxing too. And I was joking with one of my friends Fridays. The last couple of weeks have been almost like a boxing ghost town. There's been so little on, but that does not stop us in the world of club boxing. We have a ton to talk about. And this coming weekend, I feel like I always say that we've got a huge weekend coming up or that I'm really excited about it, but we do. We've got a big weekend. I'm really excited. So, I mean, I'm not, this isn't a bit.
So, Tim, are you trying to tell us that you're not lying about your excitement that you have for what we've got coming up?
I mean, I don't know how we could I couldn't fabricate it. We would have ran out of steam a couple episodes ago. So here we are.
I think you are absolutely right about that. So now, what were you excited about this past weekend? Typically we start the podcast with the story of the week, and that could be, anything really. So what caught your eye?
Yeah, this is really cool because the story of the week over the first dozen or so episodes, and I think, going forward it will remain this, but it's usually been something a bit odd, strange, something that needs some deeper explanation because of various things that happen in and around bouts or in and around promotions or what have you. And all that, like I said, will definitely continue. But I wanted to take a different approach this week and highlight a club promoter out of Florida who is really delivering on their entertainment value the past few years since their inception in 2019. And I'll give one of my own disclaimers here up front is that, I've got no invested interest in this promoter. They've never provided anything to me at all. In fact, I've never spoken to a single person associated with the promotion. So again, I'm just merely coming at this from a fan's perspective. And the promoter is called M&R. So Mike and Rob, like M and R, the two letters, boxing promotion. And it's based in Miami, Florida. Their president and CEO is someone named Laura Ching, which I think is pretty cool because obviously boxing is a male-dominated sport. So in my opinion, right off the top, the CEO of this company being a female and thriving in this industry just in a short number of years, I think is a story to be written by someone in and of itself. But they began, like I said, in 2019, and they've got a mixture of their own house fighters, which is growing rapidly, and then a regular rotation. Well, I shouldn't say regular, a rotation of talent that they bring in to do the shows. And that's probably not that much different from a lot of club promoters. But for me, this promotion has become one that I prioritize in my viewing rotation when they're on the Stanza live streaming schedule. And shout out to my friend, King, goes by King Dinesh on Twitter, because he actually said that exact same line to me here over this past weekend. And I stole it from him and added it to my discussion here because that's the way I feel about them. And they're just overall been really good in the past 2 years in delivering good quality entertainment. And I'm going to give you some more details and share some stuff about them because there's some fun details along the way. The first one is that the regular matchmaker, and if you're a real boxing nerd or a box rec nerd, this name will ring a bell for you. Someone by the name of Melvin Rivas is their regular matchmaker. A very, very experienced matchmaker, very busy man, and does an excellent job at the club level by putting together good quality matches. I think he's really excelled in this role with M&R. And it's interesting, as I was looking through some of the stuff he's been doing other than M&R, we talked about the show at the top of our show, just briefly, from the Minneapolis Armory on June 27th. And it was a PBC on Fox show, and he was the matchmaker for that. And I find that noteworthy because one of the things we just briefly talked about that doesn't really fit into what we talk about on this show is that the show was just the card at the Armory was so well matched that you could probably make an argument top to bottom when the year's done. It might have been one of the best shows put together in that way, and just most entertainment of any card that we might see for the year. So Mr. Rivas definitely knows what he's doing. M&R, and it's hard. I laugh because this is going to get points from me when they do this, but they've consistently streamed their fights since their inception. So right off the bat, they get points for me. But the streams have been quality. What? I'm sorry, I talked over you. On the fact that they stream their cards live.
But on what? That the quality, I know that you'll watch just about anything, but I'm curious, what is the quality like? Are they streaming off of someone's phone on Facebook, or is it vertical?
Okay, sorry. My wife always tells me that she thinks I'm book smart, but sometimes I got to connect the dots for me on the common sense thing. So yeah, sorry, you were you were asking me on what platform. So yeah, they've since their inception streamed just on Facebook, and it's been good quality streams and multiple cameras, graphics, not a cell phone stream. It's been like a professionally produced production.
Mm.
So it's been with replays a lot of times. Just depends on the show. But overall, really something that's really simple to view. You don't go through any pains to watch the show. But this one, they had an event on Friday, and it was their first foray into the club pay-per-view extravaganza. And shout out to Gifts Boxing. If you don't follow Gifts Boxing on Twitter and you're a diehard boxing fan, you should. He puts out highlights to almost every fight in the world each and every weekend. So shout out to him. He had sent me a message and said, for the price tag of $4.99 on this pay-per-view, it's probably one of the best values I've ever paid for. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, they upped the production quality a bit, and it was only $5. It was really a good value. In research for our show tonight, I was doing some reading, and I saw a couple of stories in the Miami Herald, and it sounds like M&R was quoted, I should say, and it sounds like that they are looking for television partnerships because they believe that they can deliver, good, consistent quality content. And I'd absolutely agree with that. I'd almost look at it like the partnership with that All-Star Boxing has in Miami with Telemundo, where they go sometimes a couple of times a month, and you basically using the same promoter on that Spanish broadcast channel. But I could see M&R doing something really, really similar to that, or even bigger. They put on good shows. So on their website, they say that they've created this Got Talent Fight Nights, which is the banner from which they ran under on Friday in Miami, to, quote, bring professional boxers from South and Central America, Europe, Asia, and the United States in front of our boxing federations as well as our loyal boxing communities and fans. I'll tell you, man, I think they've definitely achieved that so far in their young promotional life here. So I wanted to give some highlights of their notable stable of fighters, as well as just some folks that they've had, some fighters that they've had fighting on the shows recently. And so the way they laid it on their website is kind of interesting. And I've been watching these guys fight on their shows, but they have it in buckets by their ethnic background, and they've got some Hispanic fighters listed there, and two that will ring a bell that I wanted to mention was former world flyweight champion from Nicaragua, 26-year-old Christopher Rosales, 31-5. He's a really entertaining fighter and fights now consistently with M&R. Another one is 23-year-old Nicaraguan bantamweight Melvin Lopez, who is 25-1 with 16 knockouts. And I have to say, and I have this link in the show notes, last year in September 2020, of all the KOs I've put out on social media in about the last 3 years or so, this one from last September with Melvin Lopez, I think was the one that was shared the most across any of the platforms or any KO that I've ever put out. And Lopez landed a left hook in the first round, and his opponent was almost like in a matrix where his body literally froze, and it stood frozen for like 2-3 seconds before he hit the canvas. So you got to click the link in the show notes. It was spectacular. And then moving on from there, a couple of Filipino fighters that they have bucketed too. Raymar Caballo, who's 24-0 with 20 knockouts. He's the interim WBC World Bantamweight champ. Magic Mike Plania, 25-1 Super Bantamweight. And then the headliner from Friday's show, a Kazakh cruiserweight, kind of a short, stocky, bowling ball type of cruiserweight by the name of Sarik Musadilov, and his nickname is the Panda. Going into Friday's show, he was 9-0 with 9 knockouts, and all those knockouts came within the first 2 rounds. And one other fighter who's a regular on their stable that I wanted to mention is a Hungarian Olympian heavyweight named Istvan Bernov, who on this show improved to 4-0 with 4 knockouts. He's been moved along kind of slowly, but going to be very, very active the rest of 2021. What I mean by moving along slowly is just more of the quality of opposition has been less than sensational. But back to the main event, I mentioned Panda Musadilov. He is a Kazakh cruiserweight, 9-0, 9 knockouts, and never went past the second round. So in this main event Friday night, he was pushed to the distance for the first time, took a unanimous decision 8 victory over someone named Lamont Capers, who fell to 10, 15, and 5.
So that's a familiar name.
Is it? All right.
I know this guy.
Well, I was just going to say, well, you're a pretty diehard boxing fan. I wonder how many listeners will know Lamont Capers. It's a name to me that kind of sounded familiar, but not a really too much of a big deal in terms of a step up. But I think where the step up is, just a little bit looking back on it, is a pretty durable guy. He's only 30 years old, only been stopped 3 times, and just kind of big and long. Panda, not a really big guy for a cruiserweight, definitely stocky, but a little shorter. So just the size overall, I think, was a good experience for Musadilov to have. But he looked good and got the victory and going the full 8 rounds. Yeah, Capers, now that I click on and look through it a little bit, has definitely been in with people that folks would recognize: Frank Sanchez, Chaz Witherspoon.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah,
like, that name sounds awfully familiar.
Yep, Jerry Forrest, the club boxing legend the club boxing legends that is Darnell Boone, 24-4. Guy's
Mm-hmm.
a legend in and of himself. Why did you groan when I said Jerry Forrest's name?
Because I can't stand watching him.
Yep. Yep. I feel you. I was just, if you listen to the other podcast I put on a couple of days ago, I was just mentioning to Kari Scott. That's the biggest reason why I decided to watch Fighter A over Fighter B. Is I just want to be entertained, and somebody like that who is going to bore me to death. It's just too much else on to go through that. So anyway, just wrap it up here. They had a handful of Cubans on the show too on Friday night. That was really cool. There was one really good knockout, and again, Gifts Boxing had it, and I have it in the show notes for you to see. And another one of the Cubans that was on the show was a 2016 Olympic bronze medalist, a bantamweight. So you would want to go in and take a look at him too. Ioannis Argilagos.
Argilagos. He is a
Argilagos.
very talented young fighter. Did pretty well in the Olympics. He got a bronze. But I think that this is a guy that he's still young. Let him develop as a pro, and we're looking at a future world champion.
Yeah, and we mean by that, of course, we mean legitimate world champion.
No, I'm look. This is a Tim Boxeo show. We're out here talking about every 3-letter sanctioning body you can think of. We're probably going to mention here. So let's not be picky with the world titles we want to give credit to around here, but probably one of the major 4 ones.
Yeah, he'll be a big one. So yeah, check out M&R Promotions. The cool thing is they're going to stay busy the rest of the year, and I'll make a mental note. We'll definitely talk about them in lead up to their next show. But they're running again August 20th, September 24th, and November 20th. So if you have yet to dip your toes in the water with club level boxing, I'm going to strongly push you to do one of two things. Either wait for the next M&R show, or we've got a guest coming on at the end of the show. We'll have some great entertainment for you coming up here in the coming weeks. So we'll talk about that some more in the interview segment of our show here just shortly.
All right. Now, maybe there's overlap here, maybe there isn't, but were there any really good fights this week that we should talk about? Either dramatic, violent, bloodbath? What do you have for us?
That was great. So there were some really good ones. The first one I wanted to talk about was out of Munich, Germany. And it's funny because it doesn't fit any of those things that you just described. But it was interesting in a couple of different ways. So it was the main event in Munich on Saturday. It was a 10-round super middleweight bout, broadcast live on a pay-per-view platform called Fight 24, which is primarily a German and European platform, for about €10. And in that main event, Poland's journeyman Taras Golovchenko improved to 6-4.
That's made up, right?
Is he Golovchenko?
Golovchenko, like he's like, yeah. How about we take Gennady Golovkin, we take Vasily Lomachenko, put them together. What do we got? Golovchenko?
It's not made up, nor is it a misspelling, because I just copied and pasted, and I hope it. Yeah, it's not the easiest name to say. He upsets the headliner of the show and house fighter Alexander Rigas, Alexander the Great, who falls to 13-2, and he actually takes Rigas's IBO Continental title away from him. And I have some pictures linked in the show notes that you'll want to click on, and we'll get to that in a second, because they're worth it, believe me. So, like I said, the fight wasn't really dramatic. It wasn't necessarily exciting, so to speak. But as you and I know, and our listeners know, we root for the journeyman on this show. And there was a couple of different things that I think were noteworthy that I'm going to mention to you now. So first of all, the venue was outdoors, and it looked like it was a busy, crowded city park with some vendors, brick and mortar vendors, right around the ring. There was a rock climbing wall in the background, all within just a really tight space. So I don't know who picked the venue, but it was definitely one of the more interesting ones you'd see.
Someone who wanted a rock climb after.
Yeah, sure. What the hell? Let's go climb the wall. Uh, Rigas, of course, was there to add another win to his ledger. And all promoters, right? This is the business that they're in. They're in to build their fighters up the best they can. Of course, they want to make entertaining bouts along the way, but improve their rankings, try to get them in position to fight for world titles. But generally speaking, Germany does that in a way to me that it's just a little it's like all that on steroids, right? The German fighters grab as many belts as possible along the way, and it's just a little more kind of out in the open, and I don't know how else to describe it other than they just do it maybe with fighters that don't maybe I don't want to say deserve the belts they're wearing. That's kind of a harsh thing to say, but they're a little more maybe built up than some of the fighters in other parts of the world. I think there's a lot of different examples over the years in the past 25 years to pull from. So we'll just leave it at that. But clearly there was a misstep here in this one for Alexander Rigas. So the first 3 rounds, it's clear to me that there's a style problem in his fight. Taras is, I'm going to call him by his first name. Taras has got him by a couple of inches in height, and the reach definitely played with that as well. And when you read different boxing stories or listen to boxing trainers, you'll hear them say, right, that boxing is a really easy sport if you just stick to the fundamentals. And that's all Taras was doing in this fight. He was just using his length, being first with his jab, keeping Rigas at arm's length, and really nothing too exciting really happened in the fight, other than the fact that Rigas really didn't do anything different as rounds just continued to pile up in Taras's favor. And it reminds me of a story from a fighter that used to be a friend of mine, and I haven't talked to him in a long time, but like 15 years ago, we were discussing his next fight because he was just a friend of mine, and I didn't think very highly of his opponent, but it was a regional level title fight, and that my friend was a little shorter, and this fighter was a little longer and taller. And I said to him, the only thing is, this guy's got you for a couple of inches, so you're going to have to get inside with him and go to work. Have you guys been working in the gym about getting past his jab and getting inside? And it was quiet for a second on the phone. He said, no, we haven't been doing that. I'm like, oh, well,
Really?
I'm just your friend, so I'm probably the wrong guy to give you that type of tactical advice. And this was the day before the fight, so I thought that maybe Rigas didn't even get to that point with a friend in this discussion prior to the Taras fight, because everything just continued as normal throughout the fight. And then in the 9th and 10th, the crowd's cheering him on, Rigas, and then the first 30 seconds of the round, Rigas really starts to put the pressure on and gets inside, lets his hands go literally for the first time in the fight, and goes to work. But then as he's backing out, Taras really clips him. And then as Rigas kind of gains his composure, as they're kind of squaring off again, Taras just sticks a jab in his face. And it was just an encapsulation of the fight in and of itself for the full 10 rounds. But we're in Germany. We're going to the scorecards, and I'm like, oh, gosh, how is this one going to go? And it was really straightforward. They read the scores, unanimous decision, 10 victory for Taras. And he was over the top excited. And I've got a couple of cool screen grabs there to look at. And rightly so, they strap him with Rigas's IBO Continental middleweight title, or light middleweight title. And then a really strange thing happened for all the different fights that I've seen. I've never really seen it this out in the open, I don't think, is that the IBO official puts the belt on Taras, and then you can very clearly see him. And I've got the link also to the full fight. If you want to just watch this 30 seconds at the end of the fight, you can. Or I've got some screen grabs of this moment too. You can see the IBO official clearly look at Rigas and just kind of shrug his shoulders and put his hands up in the air with his palms up and be like, listen, like, you lost the fight. I've got to give this guy the belt. It was the strangest scene I think I've seen. And he did it like twice because it looked like there was some kind of a conversation going on between him and Rigas in the ring, but just very expressively sharing with Rigas, hey, I got to hand the belt off to the other guy. I'm sorry. So that was a really interesting fight for all of those reasons. And shout out to the Polish journeyman. We always celebrate that here.
All right, what else do we have? Surely
So
there's not another one.
there really isn't another one of note, but I do want
I
to
meant
mention.
journeyman upset, but
Okay,
I'm
yeah,
sure there
gotcha.
were other fights to talk about.
Yeah. No, there's another fight to talk about. I don't no other journeyman upsets, but one to keep an eye on the bigger boxing scene because this one's been kind of bubbling under the surface on the club level. Uh, Nigerian heavyweight named Rafael Akpajori improved to 12-0 with 12 knockouts when he got an RTD1 corner retirement after the first over someone named Steven Lyons, who fell to 5-7-1 in the main event in Miami, Florida. And Rafael Akpajori is notable for a bunch of different reasons. Obviously, number one, he's a heavyweight, 12-0 with 12 knockouts, and he's huge. 6'8", 250 pounds. And he is trained by Glenn Johnson, the Road Warrior, former light heavyweight world champion and slayer of Roy Jones Jr. And Akpajori's got a super interesting background. Lived in Nigeria till he was 17. Was recruited to play basketball from the infamous Sunrise Christian Academy in the Midwest that exists basically only to pull basketball recruits out of weird places in the world and then move them on to scholarships, which he did, and moved on to University of Miami as a basketball recruit. Did an odd thing, switched to American football. Neither of those sports stuck, and now he ends up as a 30-year-old heavyweight with a 12 fight knockout string. And there's a whole bunch of interviews with Akpajori out there on YouTube and the social media world. Really smart guy. He's got 2 mechanical engineering degrees. And right around the time of this fight from Saturday night in Miami, it's hard to tell if it was right before or right after, but anyway, did an interview with Sky Sports in the UK, mentioned his dream fight would be with Tyson Fury, and told Glenn Johnson that he's ready to fight Tyson Fury now. And Glenn Johnson told him that and Akpajori said all this in the interview. Glenn Johnson told me, we're going to pump the brakes on that for now, but has been calling out Dillian White for, a good year now. And Akpajori was actually called for the Olympics out of Nigeria, but never really spoke about whatever happened. He went back home, trained for it, and seemed to be all set up to participate, but only thing he would say is that it never really materialized, and you just have to ask the Nigerian government why. So I'm not real sure what happened there, but I guess my closing remark on him would be, of course, his thought of where he is as a professional versus someone like Glenn Johnson, who clearly knows that he needs to build up his fighter and get him some more experience along the way. And as a 30-year-old, and I think it's time after 12 bouts for him to really move on in his professional experience. He has not fought anyone yet that would even remotely go rounds with him. So we'll see how the ascension goes from here. But if we don't see him in the next 6 to 9 months on a big show in the United States, it will be because he'd been exposed prior to that point, but he's getting really close.
Uh, so how bad was the KO?
Well, this particular fight was a corner retirement, so it wasn't bad, but he was unloading on the guy prior to the end of the round. He had some video clips up on his Instagram, but he's had some pretty big KOs. He's a bit robotic. He's a huge guy, so I guess that kind of goes without saying for most of them. Tyson Fury is and Deontay Wilder even to some degrees. They're freaks that way, unlike the rest of the world. But he's definitely a big puncher. So
Yeah,
we'll
I
see how things
mean,
go from here.
6'8", 250 pounder. I've looked at pictures of him. He's in pretty decent shape. I imagine that when you're coming up and facing like a guy like Mike Ford or sorry, Stephen Lyons, who's 5'7" and 1, I mean, that could go a lot of different ways, but the predictable one on paper is like, yeah, this is going to be rough. And so, but a corner stoppage just means that Steven might have taken some shots, but the corner was like, yeah, maybe next time.
Yeah, it was the right decision.
But so you think that Akpejori will be getting himself onto the big stage in the coming months?
Well, he said he wants to stay really busy. I mean, he's got a hella interesting story. That's why I wanted to mention him. A lot of cool things about his background. Like you said, he looks like a devastating one punch KO puncher when you just look at him in still shots. He's huge. He's got Glenn Johnson as a trainer. So I just can't imagine 12 months are going to go by and we're not going to see him on Showbox or some level of big show in the States. I'd be very surprised.
Do you think anyone listening to this doesn't know who Glenn Johnson is?
I have no idea. Maybe some younger folks, possibly. I don't know.
I'm curious. What's the age range of the Tim Boxeo listener, and how familiar are you with Glenn Johnson?
I have no idea, but I have no idea. Glenn Johnson would fit perfectly into our show and everything we're about here. Anyone, anywhere, anytime. That was Glenn Johnson.
All right. What else do we have? We spoke to Christopher Lovejoy last week, and so I imagine we're going to get an update on him. So what do you have?
Yeah, his show was Sunday at Big Punch in Tijuana, and Chris was scheduled to fight his first bout since his KO2 defeat to Manuel Char on May 15th. But multiple opponents fell through for Chris. He was on standby as late as the first couple of bouts already in the books at Big Punch on Sunday, and he was still on standby. But eventually his fight just got scratched altogether. So Chris was rescheduled for September 3rd, again at Big Punch. So, unfortunate. But the other thing we mentioned that I wanted to quickly update was his first promotional signee, heavyweight DeAndre Savage, made his pro debut. He actually led the show off, scored 3 knockdowns in the first round, and got a TKO 1 victory at Big Punch in Tijuana. And former guest of our show, BoxRec Gray, shout out to BoxRec Gray, mentioned on Twitter that same day, Sunday, that Savage was a Final 8 participant for the Olympic trials as a heavyweight. Now he's a 30-year-old pro with a record of 1-0. So Savage has, some decent background in the amateurs, and it's a good signee by Lovejoy, now promoted by Lovejoy Promotions and handled by our guy Repo Rick. So there's no doubt that Savage will be front and center across social media platforms here moving forward, and he'll be back in action also on September 3rd. So that'll be a fun show to tune into. And last but not least, before we move on in the show, I just wanted to mention to everybody, I got a couple of clips. We've got some serious knockouts that I've linked in the show notes. So take a click on those. One from Kazakhstan and one from South Africa, and they were off the charts. Exciting knockouts. So when you're done listening, take a click through there and check them out.
All right. Well, anything we should also talk about? Maybe you know, the not so rosy side of club boxing.
Whenever we get to this part, I feel like I need to lower my voice and like temper my enthusiasm because we're here to raise up all the good things about club boxing. I'm not here to disparage the things about club boxing. It's just that sometimes things happen that are a little out of the ordinary. If you're a mainstream boxing follower, that happened, right? And this one kind of falls in that bucket. It was the pro debut of a Las Vegas resident that up till Sunday at Big Punch I had never heard of. His name was Steve View, and I've got a link here to his box rec underneath, as well as the video clip of the fight. He improves to 1-0 as he knocks out Jorge Luis Arana, who falls to 0-6. They're welterweights. Unfortunately, the knockout only took 17 seconds. So Steve landed a 1-2, and Arana had seen enough. And judging by what we've seen from Alejandra Ayala, the new commissioner at Big Punch, my guess is we're going to see Mr. Arana, if not suspended for an extended period of time, after this fight, maybe get one more chance. And then if he doesn't turn things around, he might receive a little bit longer suspension because this one was less than stellar.
Well, I watched the clip, which, again, it's 17 seconds. It don't take much, but a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I can say that Arana probably needs to be suspended permanently.
That's fair.
I mean, look, I'm all for these guys who don't have the slickest skills, the most traditional background of being a professional boxer. But then there are times when guys look like they've never been in the ring before. And granted, I think the barrier to entry, not just in Tijuana, but all over the world, I think the barrier to entry in a lot of places is really low. And Arana looks like he's literally wherever the line is, he's below it. And so I'm guessing that we will not see this guy again. And if we do, he's got to fight somebody that's not got any sort of amateur pedigree, no experience, because then you may possibly get a very entertaining fight out of Arana. But a guy like Steve View, I think that's how you say his name, that's just, it's no good.
Well, and I'll even take your comment a step further, and this will make me. I'm not a huge rough and rowdy fan or all that stuff. I don't watch any stuff.
That sounds like an adult video series from the OOs. What are you talking about?
You've never heard of Rough and Rowdy?
Was this like a sister company of Girls Gone Wild?
No, it's not. It's Tim and Angelo from the bar can go put on headgear and beat the shit out of each other, and they televise it on pay-per-view.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, that's not my thing, but I guess my point I was going to make was I honestly, on the pro level for club boxing, I don't give a shit about the quality of the opponent in the blue corner. If the guy in the blue corner just comes to fight, I'm okay. If he wants to make a living and he's doing his best to improve every time out and he's just ready to fight, I really don't care. But that wasn't the case with Mr. Arana, unfortunately, this weekend. So anyway, that's enough of that.
I just think it's kind of weird that the amount of boxing you watch from all the different parts of the world with the varying degrees of quality and skill, rough and rowdy's where you draw the line. I'm just saying.
I just like pro boxing.
Oh, that's okay. All. So you just don't want headgear. Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't want headgear.
Oh, all right. All right. Tim, never mind. Is there anyone this week that certainly is above the rough and rowdy level, but may even get to like a Showtime, like a Showbox card?
I'm really intrigued by the cliffhanger we just left off, and where you were going was like there were about six roads diverging that that we could have went down from there. And I'm really curious on where you were taking that conversation, but we're about 40 minutes in, and we've got a guest coming on, so maybe we'll just hit the pause button on that for next time. We'll pick it up. And maybe that will be the story of the week next week. Who the hell knows? So
Story of the week.
yeah.
Where were you going with the rough and rowdy comments?
Yeah, exactly. The schedule was so light this weekend that graduation onto the next level was almost non-existent. I mean, fights in general were almost non-existent. But we previewed this guy, and I want to mention him. And shout out to my guy Ryan Scalia, who is an extremely knowledgeable boxing participant. I wouldn't even know what I would call Ryan. Ryan does everything.
He fights?
Matchmaking. No, matchmaking.
He ain't a participant.
Soon to be promoter. He does it all. But
oh, nice.
We previewed the fight in Tijuana, and I want to say it was Friday night at Big Punch. Big Punch had 3 shows. It's tough to keep it all sorted out of my head. Might have been Saturday. 19-year-old welterweight Carlos El Burrito Garcia improved to 4-0 with 3 knockouts, with a body shot knockout in the 3rd round of, I think, a debutante by the name of Abiel Murillo. But the challenge is, sometimes you never get bout sheets at a Big Punch. We've talked about this before, and the names often get butchered along the way. And so finding out names of the blue corner just by hearing the ring announcer say the name, and then finding things in odd places on the internet and trying to understand who we have here in the ring is not always easy. But I think it was a debutante. Anyway, Garcia is interesting because he's only 19. He's a welterweight. He's 4-0 now, and he has a huge following, a really popular fighter. The place exploded. They've got fans full force back at Big Punch, and the place just erupted when this kid came in the ring. Extremely raw, but by all accounts from the research I've done, looks like a gym rat, always in the gym. Got a lot of talent, but he's just really raw. And Ryan and I were just trading messages about him, and Ryan was from some work in Mexico too, and just looks like this kid could have some potential. So someone to earmark. I think it's going to be a while yet, but we'll at least keep following him here on the Tim Boxeo show at the club level in and around Tijuana. So shout out to El Burrito.
I have my own graduation time.
Okay.
I think the setup at Big Punch is ready for graduation, because if you look at the clip you posted of El Burrito, I'm very sure that anyone who just kind of glances at this would think that this is the Joker's hideout. What is with the yellow and purple color scheme?
Whoa. First of all, that's neon green.
Okay. Sorry, did I say yellow? I meant green.
You said yellow.
I meant green.
Okay,
this is the Joker's colors.
Well, we've talked about so much the past 5-6 weeks. Remember back to Beto. Shout out to Beto Duran.
Yeah.
It's a very much. It fits in the theme of Big Punch, from what I understand from Beto's comments. Obviously, I've never been there. I'll make a pilgrimage soon, but it fits. It's a very much a nightclub vibe in there. So they got the nightclub music going. They got the strobe light. God, I sound old now. Do the kids even call it strobe lights anymore? I don't even know.
No, they don't do strobe lights anymore due to seizure precautions.
They've got the lights going, so the lime green and purple ring ropes are a perfect fit.
I swear, guys, it looks like the Joker's hideout. I'm just saying.
It's great. It's exactly as it should be. As a matter of fact, there's one promoter in Tijuana called Alpha Boxing Promotions.
All right, I like
that. when they do their shows at Big Punch, they bring in all their own gear,
Mm-hmm.
their own ring mat, their own ring ropes with their branded ring, and it just doesn't fit. It doesn't work. It doesn't give me the same feel at Big Punch.
Uh, yeah, Tim's like, if it doesn't look like Jim Lee drawed it, I don't want to. I'm not watching.
It's just got to be that way.
Uh,
You can't change Fenway Park. Okay.
yeah, I suppose you're right. Now, I see here on the notes, this is very disappointing to me. There is nobody who made their debut in the 90s that is still fighting this
There
weekend at
isn't.
least. That's just unfortunate for me.
I mean, there's no one that we want to really dig
Lucian
into.
Bute's not making a comeback. I mean, come on.
No, no. Who knows? Maybe they'll up update box right here before the weekend. So we'll see.
All right. Well, what do we have coming up this weekend?
Okay, so much coming up that I had to pare down the schedule, and we've got our guest coming up here shortly. So I will keep this segment of our show moving. But subscribers to my stanza schedule, the live streaming schedule that I keep in my bio on my social media platforms. My apologies. I had a couple of life things get in the way here the last couple of days. So the schedule isn't quite updated, but it will be here within the next, we're recording on Tuesday, within the next 24 hours or so. So my apologies, but normally I put these live streaming links in the show notes. So you'll just have to follow my bio and my social media platforms to get the links if you do rely on that. But I did a podcast a couple of days ago solo with 23-year-old heavyweight Dakari Mac Truck Scott. So hopefully you listened to that show. Mac Truck was a fun guest, and if you didn't, I'll just give you a couple of quick bullets. We won't rehash the whole thing. But Mac Truck is 5-0 with 5 knockouts. Why do you laugh when I say his nickname?
No,
It's an awesome
I
nickname.
no, I coughed. I just tried to like not do it. I should have muted myself, but I couldn't help it.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Approved. So
No, I'm definitely
coughing
not laughing.
permitted. Oh,
I
no.
I will be
Mac
laughing
Trucks.
very soon, but not yet.
Okay, cool. Mac Truck's that's a fantastic nickname. So he'll face 30-year-old heavyweight Jaden Booth, who is 3-2, and Jaden is a 6'4", 250-pound heavyweight. And if you heard my discussion earlier with Mac Truck, I think this is a perfect opponent for Dakari at this point of his career, because Jaden Booth I watched on a pay-per-view in Murfreesboro, Tennessee a couple of months ago, brought in to lose, of course, but given a good outing to a local attraction in Murfreesboro named Rydell Booker, who was 8-0 at the time. And in the first round,
Ugh.
Booker just, why did you do that?
Rydell Booker, not fun to watch.
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, here's what happened in that one really quick and this is why I think it's such a good opponent for this point for Dakari, because they can't get anyone to go past one round with Dakari Scott.
That is a good problem to have as a 23-year-old heavyweight.
Yeah, absolutely. And Booker dropped Booth like a sack of potatoes in the first round. And Booth got up and over the next 2 rounds just wore Booker down and knocked him out. And so I just loved the giddy up and Booth or getting up off the canvas in a fight that he was clearly brought in to lose. Is a really nice opponent, and he's big, 6'4", 250. And if you listen to my discussion, you heard, but if not, Dakari is a big kid too. He's 250, but he's only 5'10". So
he looks like a baby if you look at his box rack.
Yeah, he's got a baby face. I should have brought that up to him. I didn't. But you want to tune into this because it'll be their shows, Southpaw Promotions, shout out to Southpaw Promotions. They put on good club shows, a really nice, well-produced show. It'll have multiple cameras, everything like that. It'll be a little more on the expensive side. I think it'll be $20. But the other couple of cool things about Dakari, he's a former Olympic trial participant in 2019 as a heavyweight, but he's got one punch KO power with a hook. but he's also really good in his feet, really fast hands. He's an elusive fighter, good defense. He's someone that within the next couple of fights, he signed to Greg Cohen. Within the next couple of fights, he keeps doing what he's doing. He'll be on Showbox. There's no doubt about it. So you'll want to see Dakari Scott, and this should be a fun fight to watch him in.
That is the co-creator of Ring City, Greg Cohen, right?
Oh, is it really? Yeah, I didn't know that.
Well, according to a lawsuit, he alleges that he is one of the co-creators of Ring City.
A very a very popular in a very short period of time level promotion on television. But yeah, the lawsuit you mentioned, I have no idea. I don't pay attention to that kind of stuff.
Just my podcast leaking into this one.
Gotcha.
But I am definitely looking forward to this one. I like what I see from Dakari.
Yeah, great kid too. I hope he does well. So I'll be rooting for him this weekend. Let me run down a couple other things, Angelo, here before we get on to our esteemed guest. There's just so much. I don't really want to go to anything to any deep level, but I do want to just bring some things to your attention that may be a little bit under the surface if you're not a hardcore club boxing fan. And if you are, then we're excited about all the same stuff. So Saturday in Belgium, a bunch of interesting bouts on a really big card. It's actually a WBA cruiserweight title bout on the main event of the show. Riyad Murray, 29-1, was supposed to face Kevin Lorena from South Africa, and what would have really been a cruiserweight super fight, so to speak. But Lorena got hurt, pulled out, and a Chinese fighter, pretty unknown guy, 10-1-1, steps in to take his place. It'll be on pay-per-view. It'll be on Fight Nation, which is a French sub-streaming site. It'll be on Club RTL, all kinds of different ways to watch this show, and I'll keep you updated on that.
Riyad's like a page one box rec guy whose name I've seen like 100 times, but I could not tell you what he looks like.
Well, he looks like
he's like Umar Salamov for me.
I don't even know who that is.
He's a light heavyweight, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's a light heavyweight.
Rad Murray looks like a guy who's never left the gym and is a WBA cruiserweight champion from Belgium. I mean, he looks like he's chiseled out of stone. I mean, he is a impressive looking human being. But yeah, that's a pretty big fight. It would have been even bigger, but nonetheless, the card top to bottom was pretty good. There's a lot of good fights in the card. And then switching gears just a little bit, German heavyweight prospect. This will be on the stream live on the internet. Peter Kadyrov, 10-0, 5 knockouts, will be in action. I want to say he had some affiliation to Top Rank. I might be wrong on that. I want to say 2 fights ago, one of his fights surfaced on ESPN Plus, like at the last minute, but maybe I'm confusing him with someone. But Kadyrov is an interesting prospect, only 24 years old, has got loads of talent, but in his last 2 fights has kind of underperformed. So he's got a nice little step-up fight versus a fighter who's 21-5, Adnan Redzovic. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, he did fight on ESPN Plus. They aired a card from Germany. I don't know if he was it was an Ajit Kabayel card, and I guess he was just on the undercard of it and got featured. Not bad. I think you might be the only one that remembers that, Tim.
And now that you say that, that was probably the reason why he was on there. But anyway, so this is probably, for me, the highlight of the whole weekend. It'll be a fight from Japan broadcast live on YouTube. And it is a 19-year-old light welterweight named Jin Sasaki. He is 10-0 with 9 knockouts. And he is all action, all entertainment, all must-see TV every time you see him. I mean, he does it all, from the ring walk to the showboating to delivering on all of the above when he gets in the ring and coming through with sensational knockouts. Jin Sasaki is a future superstar in boxing. And I want to say this show, it's escaping me right now, but I think in typical fashion in Japan, it's kind of a midday show in Japan. So it's scheduled for Saturday, which means it'll probably be on really late Friday night in the United States. And I'm saying like 10, the card will start streaming about 10, 11 p.m. in US time. So Eastern time. So we should be good to get a really late night treat and see Jin Sasaki. And it should be also available on demand on YouTube. So again, subscribe to the Stanza schedule and we'll take care of you that way. That'll be fun. And then shout out to my friends at Elite Boxing Promotions from Southern California. They're running a show Saturday at Big Punch, the Mecca, returning for their second show. It'll be streamed live on YouTube. And Big Punch shows on YouTube are always a treat. And it'll be really well produced. So Beto Duran called the first one, and we talked about that. And that's what brought him his experience from Big Punch to come on our show and share all about that. So Elite Boxing Promotions is running again on Saturday. So I'll have that one earmarked. And then two last things. One is Saturday from Turkey, massive pay-per-view. My friend Fatih Altunkaya, a.k.a. Kara Kurt, is a 25-0 cruiserweight from the Black Wolves Fight Club in Wiesbaden, Germany. But he's of Turkish descent. This is on pay-per-view. He's 36 years old. He is 25-0, like I said. And he has the unique distinction of being, according to Boxer at Gray, from about a year ago when we traded DMs about this, the winningest fighter in the world in 2020, going 12-0, improving his record to 25-0. And Kara Kurt's been really busy here in 2021 already. And he'll be one of the main features of this massive event out of Turkey, which I couldn't be more excited to watch. So shout out to the Black Wolves Fight Club and my friend Kara Kurt. I can't wait for that. Let me close out with this one, Angelo. And this is the epitome of what we want to see at the Tim Boxeo show, right? Because I tweeted out 2 years ago the pro debut in Rosarito, Mexico, something that still to this day isn't even on his box rec because of the Rosarito Boxing Commission, is now very soon to be within days, if it hasn't already happened today, I'm unsure. Soon to be 18-year-old, I think he's still 17, Ashton Silva, who's 4-0 with 4 knockouts. His box rec says 3-0, 3 knockouts. I've seen every one of his fights so far and tweeted out the highlights. He is taking a massive step up in exposure. I don't think he's listed on box rec yet, so I don't think we have a known opponent for him, if I'm not mistaken.
I didn't see when I checked earlier.
No. Yeah, I checked yesterday, and it wasn't. So he'll be on the Charlo undercard, super bantamweight. So the only thing that scares me about this is lately Showtime hasn't been live broadcasting those undercard bouts. Sometimes they'll go live on Facebook and YouTube and stuff, but lately they've been skipping it altogether. I sure hope that doesn't happen with Ashton. Or I hope Ashton, they have him as maybe the lead-in bout when the broadcast kicks off. That would be fantastic. But it'll be great to see that young kid on a big stage, because I've been a close follower, and I know lots of other people have been too that listen, of his Instagram. And by all accounts, he puts in a ton of work. He's his own promoter, got a little promotional crew that he's been running shows down at Big Punch the last 18 months. And I just really like to see this young man succeed, and he has a world of talent. So it'll be fun to see how he develops from here. And that's it.
Well, that is a packed week of boxing, but it doesn't end there. We will now welcome in Peter. How do I say his last name?
Czymbor.
Well, I mean, I guess I should have figured that one out. Of Boston Boxing Promotions.
I wanted to take a minute to welcome our guests and also realized that I've already butchered our guest's last name. Peter Czymbor from Boston Boxing Promotions has been gracious enough to give us some time on what I can only imagine has been an unbelievable month preparing for 3 shows, 3 weeks in succession. So, Peter, thanks a lot for making time to join us here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. And if you did butcher my last name prior to me joining in on this call, it's okay. I did have a first day of school experience every year for 12 years growing up in schools, and it was never gotten right by any of my homeroom teachers on day one. So it's okay.
It's really not that difficult. It's just I'm really bad at it. So, no, this is cool, man.
I was talking to a friend of mine, Chris J, the other day, who actually made his pro debut in his one and only pro fight at one of my shows a few months ago. And he also manages a guy who fights in a lot of my shows named Danny Robles. And someone called him about one of his fighters, and he said, "Oh, we're fighting on Peter Czymbor's show, Boston Boxing Promotions." Or he just said Boston Boxing Promotions. And the person's response was, "Oh, yeah, that's that guy's company with the weird last name." So apparently
it's making the rounds. Yep. Okay. Got it.
Rounds, notoriety for all the right reasons, right?
That's right. And Chris J is a personal hero of mine, not only because he's a rock star that's played on the Vans Warped Tour, and who among us men hasn't want, and women for that matter, hasn't wanted to be a rock star at one point in our life, but then also to be on BoxRec from now until the end of time as having made his pro debut. And I told Angela, I didn't tell you this, but I told my wife that I'm going to make, when I turn 50 here shortly, I'm going to make my pro debut at Big Punch, and I'm going to knock you out. So,
well, first of all, you're not knocking me out. Second, I will put my services up for the highest bidder. So, Peter, if you want my services, let me know. I have no manager, though.
I'll tell you right now, you mentioned Chris J being 1-0 from here to eternity on BoxRec. When I needed a last-minute replacement for Brandon Higgins on one of my more recent shows, I was about 10 minutes away from asking Chris, "Hey, Chris, want to throw that undefeated record away?" But alas, Calvin Glover stepped in, and Chris did not need to risk his health.
I mean, it's legendary. I just, it was fantastic. That was a great night. All right, so I digress. Peter, for those, would be a great, I hate to go 101 on you here, speaking of school, but for those unfamiliar, we should at least touch on kind of the background of Boston Boxing Promotions, what your role is there, or even, how it's changed over the years, how the business started, and just familiarize the fans with your company here before we get started any further.
So Boston Boxing Promotions is a boxing promotion company that has existed for 8 years now. Our first show was held in May of 2013 at Dorchester Armory in Boston, Massachusetts. And I would like to think we've become one of the more prominent club show promoters on the Northeast, if not the entire country. And we have been running with great regularity in recent years, including running with regularity while doing so responsibly during the pandemic, with some live stream shows that we did empty arena style on YouTube, which is, I think, how we sort of got the attention of folks like you on Twitter and whatnot. And we've got 3 shows coming up, July 23rd, July 30th, and August 6th at the Castleton Banquet and Conference Center in Windham, New Hampshire, which is just about 10 minutes over the border from Massachusetts to New Hampshire. And tickets are available at boxingnh.com if any of your listeners want to get tickets. And I am just knee-deep in matchmaking 3 shows right now that will be taking place in the upcoming weeks. And I can't wait to see them take place, and I can't wait for them to be over. I heard an interview recently with the comedian John Mulaney, and they asked him if he enjoys doing shows, comedy shows in his case. And he said, "No, I enjoy the relief of when they're over." And I thought, oh, that man is my spirit animal. He's speaking to me right now because I have felt the same way at times. But in all seriousness, I'm looking forward to these upcoming 3 shows. And we're less than 2 weeks out from our first of 3, so it's going to be great.
How did you, sorry, Tim, but how did you...
No, go ahead.
How did you get into boxing? Like, were you a fan of boxing? Is this a family business? were you? What did you do before this? And now I assume that this is like your life to be the promoter, matchmaker, event planner, coordinator, and everything in between.
So I grew up in Brockton, Massachusetts, where I still live, which is the hometown of legendary heavyweight champion Rocky Marciano and legendary middleweight champion Marvelous Marvin Hagler. So you grow up in a world where boxers are put on a pedestal. The name of my high school, Brockton High School, our team nickname was the Brockton Boxers, for example. So boxing was always around me, and I was a casual fan growing up. I say casual because it's truly hard to be a hardcore fan growing up when your parents don't subscribe to premium cable in the 90s, which is where boxing was in the 90s. It was all HBO and Showtime. So I would watch boxing when it had its rare occasions on free TV. I mean, I still remember to this day watching Fox NFL Sunday all day and couldn't wait for Mike Tyson versus Buster Mathis to come on that night on Fox, for example. But I got involved in boxing in my early 20s, probably. I was writing for a website called boxingherald.com and then 8countnews.com, and I wanted to get into broadcasting, boxing broadcasting. I've done broadcasting my entire life. I was on a TV show when I was a kid called Kids Company Sports World and Kids Talk Sports on New England Cable News, and I would do the football and basketball games on local public access television, and I wanted to become a boxing play-by-play announcer. Well, opportunities to do that were few and far between at the time. So I had the foresight to say, hey, streaming is going to be a big deal someday. And I started a pay-per-view streaming company called AnySportsTV.com. We had some success broadcasting a few fights. Brian Minto versus Donnell Holmes comes to mind, which may not seem like a big fight in retrospect, but at the time it was a fairly significant heavyweight fight on the American scene. We had Hector Macho Camacho's final fight in Kissimmee, Florida against Saul Duran. And while if I had good accounting, which I did not because it was all me and my buddy Ed, we never profited, but I learned so much while doing that. At a certain point, I was just traveling around to these different shows and thinking, I think I can do better some of these local promoters. And I did my first show in May of 2013 at the Dorchester Armory and haven't stopped since. So I don't even know how many shows I promoted at this point, but we've been going strong for 8 years.
I know Tim really speaks highly to the production value of the Boston boxing shows, because that's usually like my first question. I just like, what is it like? Like, when you're watching a club pay-per-view, is it somebody streaming vertical on Snapchat, or like, do they got real broadcast cameras? And he's spoken real highly of the quality. And I imagine from somebody like you who spent most of their life either wanting to be on TV or being on TV, that's something that's probably pretty important to you.
So I have a lot of really good friends, and I joke that all my idiot friends get roped into all my idiot shit. My friends from public access and broadcast television. Hey, man, what camera did you get? You get this cable? Do you get these headsets? Want to help me out with my show? Cool, I'll throw you a few $100. That's kind of how it works at this point. And just to correct you on something, Angelo, my original website, which I created years ago, which is long gone, AnySportsTV.com, was an online pay-per-view streaming website because that was the only way we could monetize it at the time. These Boston boxing promotion shows to this point, and probably for the foreseeable future, are not online pay-per-views. We provide them free to the public at youtube.com/BostonBoxing, which is the way I think we're going to keep it for as long as we can. I have always been of the opinion that it is better to have the exposure of lots of eyeballs watching your product on YouTube than it is to put it behind a paywall with an online pay-per-view, unless you truly have like a mega fight that people really want to see and you need that additional revenue source, which we could be getting at some point. But right now, for example, our first show, the main event is Harry Gigliotti versus Brandon Higgins. I think it's more important for those guys to have a lot of people watching them fight and accruing more of a fan base as they hopefully maneuver themselves into bigger fights moving forward than it is for us to sell. I don't know how many that would do an online pay-per-view. My old online pay-per-view website, I think the biggest online pay-per-view we ever had sold less than 200 buys, which to tell you the truth, about 10 years ago for online pay-per-view, that was pretty damn good. But that's not the way it is anymore. It wasn't nearly as mainstream then as it is now. I just heard last weekend about a club show promoter in mixed martial arts that was doing 400 buys on online pay-per-view. And you're looking at the card going, why would anyone want to watch this and pay for it online? But apparently the fight public is getting more used to paying for content online, that even some club shows are thriving. So that's something we're going to have to take a look at in the near future. But for right now, it's not a pay-per-view. We're streaming live and free at youtube.com/Boston Boxing. And to get back to your original question, how important is the production value? I want the production value to be professional, but also cost effective. I mean, we're not putting together the production values of HBO or DAZN. We're going with a 2-camera setup at most, minimal graphics, and hardly any replays, and just some roll-ins here and there that are basically, commercial sponsors. I just want a clean stream with solid commentary, professional sounding commentary, and Gray Johnson's been fantastic as that, as well as the aforementioned Chris J and some others. And just a clean stream so that people watching it aren't taken out of it by the choppiness of the stream and poor commentary. I've watched some online broadcasts where the commentators are so amateurish, it just kind of takes me out of it, and I don't even want to watch it. And I've also seen some where the streaming is so choppy that it takes me out of it. So I want to avoid that if at all possible.
Yeah, I think that's a really good balance. Have you ever hopped on commentary?
Oh, yeah. No, I hop on commentary here and there.
Like Vince McMahon?
I've never done play-by-play like Vince McMahon for my own show. I would do it if I wasn't running around so crazy dealing with everything else. But I hop on commentary here and there. I'd love to do my Vince McMahon. What a maneuver.
I think I guess more of a statement than a question, but as someone who watches more than I should of club boxing pay-per-views of all different stripes, I think you nailed it. I mean, I don't necessarily need replays. I don't even need graphics. I just need to know that I'm going to tune in and I'm going to be able to watch the fight. That's it. Like, just keep it simple. Give me a nice clean stream. And if I get some nice professional commentary on top of it, that's just a bonus. But you'd be surprised in the things that I've actually paid for up to, $20-$30 that don't even play. So that's really important.
Yeah,
go ahead.
We're offering it for free on YouTube, and we're trying to keep it cost effective. If we were to ever get the additional revenue of, say, a streaming platform, we would absolutely up the production value. But right now, for what we're offering and for what we need, I think we've got a good setup. But if we ever had an actual platform that wanted us to give us some money to produce a broadcast, I would certainly up it. And I think that's probably the route where we would go behind a paywall if we were on a established platform for streaming. But until then, I like the YouTube setup, unless we just have a mega fight where it would be insanely stupid of us not to put it on online pay-per-view.
No, that makes sense. And I guess the last thing I'd say on that, I don't envy your situation in trying to understand what that road looks like going forward, because like you said, I mean, people are definitely more apt to pay. But then on the other hand, I'm of the same philosophy as you. I mean, I think it makes more sense to get eyeballs on the product. And then I don't have enough abacuses to understand, I'm charging someone. Why am I charging someone $5? How many $5 purchases is it going to make it worth my while to take on, to even go that route and have it behind a paywall? All that just doesn't make sense to me until you reach a certain threshold, like you're saying. So,
and then there's things that you have to consider. If you're making people pay for something, I think you have to make the quality a little bit better, which means you have to pay for more production personnel. And then you have to take things like bandwidth and whatnot into consideration. You don't want to be paying for something that ends up not working because of lack of bandwidth. So you have to jack that up, and it just gets a little expensive rather quickly. So right now we're people stupid. But, if a UFC Fight Pass or something like that ever came along, which, there's been stations here and there, we would up things considerably.
So, kind of switching gears to talk about the show, on the July 23rd show, which is in 10 days, you have 6 fighters, at least listed on BoxRec at the moment, who are making their pro debut. I'm like really curious at like for you as basically the person doing all sorts of things on this card, but like how do you go about getting these fighters to appear on the card? You have 6 who are making their debut. Like, what does the relationship you have with, like, I don't know, managers or I don't know, friends or family? Where are you getting these guys?
I would say most of the guys who are making their pro debuts in our upcoming shows, and by the way, you mentioned the first show, July 23rd, sold out right now. So
Nice.
folks, get your second and third boxingnh.com. But guys making their pro debuts on our cards usually come from either gyms or managers that we already have relationships with. Boxing is a small world, and everyone either knows everybody or knows of everybody. And I try to work with people that we exclusively like working with. I don't like divas, so I just kind of stick with the people I like working with. And I like the crew of gyms that are normally in our wheelhouse and the crew of managers that are normally in a stable. And if they tell me that someone's ready to turn pro and they're worth it, we give them a shot. So I'm looking at my July 23rd card right now. Making their pro debuts on this show is Vanessa Grimes, who's fighting Shayna Fabiano. That's basically female boxing. Matching female boxing is so difficult. The quality of women's boxing that exists right now has never been higher. The quantity still needs some work. So you kind of have to go with who's available there. Who else do we have making their pro debut on the show? Thomas Haney, Sean Bay, and Gary Cameron. Yeah, they're all people that have come from respected gyms and managers that I've worked with in the past.
And this is the main event that you mentioned earlier, Harry Gigliotto. See, I'm gonna butcher Harry's name too. Harry Gigliotto versus Brandon Higgins.
So, with all due respect to the rest of the card on July 23rd, if I had this show that was only 3 fights, it would sell out. And the 3 fights are Harry Gigliotti versus Brandon Higgins, Stephen Langlis versus Rico DePaulis, and Shayna Fabiano versus Vanessa Grimes. I literally could have sold out the Castleton on those 3 fights alone. Now, of course, I like to give people more bang for their buck when they come in than is needed. But, yeah, that Harry Gigliotti-Brandon Higgins fight maybe on its own could have sold out the place. I'm being kind in saying the 2 other fights helped out. It's that anticipated. And the Harry Gigliotti-Brandon Higgins fight is interesting because both guys train literally less than a quarter of a mile away from each other. When Harry Gigliotti does road work, he's running by Brandon Higgins' gym. They train in the same city, Haverhill, Massachusetts. Brandon Higgins is from Chelmsford, Massachusetts. Harry Gigliotti from Haverhill. It is a regional neighborhood war that has just been bubbling. And we were going to originally do this fight on Thanksgiving Eve of last year. It ended up not happening on that show, which was probably for the better because we were only allowed a limited audience at the time due to COVID restrictions. But it's just been bubbling. And the COVID pandemic probably oddly helped with the anticipation amongst local fans. So it's one of the most talked about local fights in quite some time. And I'm quite excited for it because as the matchmaker for all these shows, I generally have an idea as to who the favorite is. And I sincerely have no idea who the favorite is in this fight, who I like it.
Now, when you say that this is like anticipated locally, is there like a storyline here? Like, do these guys not like each other? Is there history or anything like that?
I don't think they don't like each other. I would say they probably don't like each other right now because they're preparing to fight each other and they're in that mindset. But there's no genuine hostility or any storyline between the two that something happened between them of a personal nature. It's just basically they have near identical records. They're from the same place. They know the same people. But the people from Chelmsford, when they see Harry Gigliotti, are saying, you know, if you ever fought Brandon Higgins, he'd kick your ass. And concurrently, when Brandon Higgins goes to places, as people know Harry, you know my boy Harry would kick your ass. And after a while, I think they want to shut up the other guy's fans. I actually think their fans are much more obnoxious to each other than either of the fighters are. But you know what? Let them settle it in the ring on July 23rd. It's going to be awesome.
Well, and if their fans want to settle it Two, they could just contact you and you can put them on the next card.
I don't want their fans fighting at all. I'm actually going to get both of them to do a public service announcement telling their fans to act like they've been here before. Because I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but since the NBA and Major League Baseball came back with fans, there is just all sorts of stupid shit happening in the fans and in the crowd. And I want to avoid that at all costs. I'm going to have Jiggly sit down and do kind of a come to Jesus moment with their fans that will put out on social media. Leave the fighting in the ring, you know. I just don't want anything stupid happening. Because, you know, some people who are rational human beings, 4 or 5 drinks later, that rationale leaves them, and I want to make sure that nothing silly happens at all costs. And I don't want to put any fans in the ring against each other. So nice try at matchmaking, Angelo, but no, not happening.
I'll leave it to you. But I did listen to a podcast, and they were talking literally about that like you've had people cooped up, they haven't been out to events, maybe their alcohol tolerance is a little lower than it used to be, and they're getting out to these sporting events, and things are getting physical very quickly.
And then what even adds to it is everyone takes their cell phones out, takes video of it, which does not dissolve anything at all. It just makes it worse. And I want to avoid that at all costs. I hired extra security for these 3 shows, put it that way.
Is there anything you could tell us about Alejandro Paulino, who is 22 years old? He's 1-0. He's will have a second fight on this card.
Yeah, Alejandro Paulino is a very good prospect, in my opinion, who trains with Dr. Roland Estrada at the Big Six boxing gym in Providence, Rhode Island. Dr. Roland Estrada is the father of Jason Estrada, the former United States Olympian, who also has a hand in training Alejandro. And it's a gym that produces quality people and a gym that produces quality fighters. Without that gym existing, there's a good portion of Southern New England boxing that wouldn't exist. And I would venture and say that 75 to 80% of the Southern New England Golden Gloves would not exist without them. Alejandro Paulino is as good of a fighter as has come out of that gym in quite some time. And we were very thrilled that he made his pro debut with us on one of our empty arena shows just a few months ago with a very impressive first-round knockout over Ernest Walls, who had a war in his previous fight on our show against Danny Robles. And I'm excited to see the progression of Alejandro as he goes on. I think that you'll be seeing Alejandro in some noteworthy platforms, perhaps as early as 2022. And I'm excited to see how his career progresses. Very early in his career now, but I think he has the raw skills to eventually make something of himself. It's just a matter if he can step up incrementally and keep it going.
Okay, and then on July 30th, you have Evan Holyfield, whose name I am assuming everyone recognizes.
Yeah, so our July 30th show, we have not formally announced this yet, but perhaps it will be formally announced by time this podcast drops. And if not, you guys have the scoop. Evan Holyfield taking on Augustin Cicero on our July 30th show. By the way, this residency of shows we're calling the Great American Boxing Bash, by the way, which is our tip of the cap to the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. And Evan Holyfield taking on Augustin Cicero, July 30th. Evan Holyfield, the son of the legendary heavyweight champ Evander Holyfield, and this will be his first ever scheduled 6-round fight against his most experienced opponent in Augustin Cicero, who's coming off an 8-round decision loss in his last fight, which was also one of our shows. So Evan Holyfield, it's interesting. He has the last name Holyfield, so I think that people are quick to either have incredibly high expectations for him based on who his father is, and people are also very quick to dismiss him if he's not as impressive in a single outing as his father was in their own memories. I think that he's a very good prospect to watch, and I'm curious to see how he does as he moves forward. I think that he's going to make a name for himself on his own skills and own talent. I think that people just need to be patient and have realistic expectations of him. Evander Holyfield of 1996 was not Evander Holyfield of 1996 and 1985, for example. So people need to have realistic expectations for him, and I think that if he were to defeat Augustin Cicero, that would be a step in the right direction for his career. But I know that Augustin Cicero thinks that his experience is going to pay dividends. So we'll see.
Another fight on this card that has my eye, one of the fan favorites, I think, of this podcast, and certainly of myself and Tim, is Robert Bricks.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about? Yeah, we had Gray on, and we probably spent 15 minutes talking about Robert Bricks. But can you tell us a little bit about this guy he's fighting, Ryan Clark, not the ESPN personality, I'm assuming.
So, Ryan Clark is a police officer in Barrington, New Hampshire, I believe. If not Barrington, New Hampshire, somewhere in the Barrington, New Hampshire area. He's originally from Barrington. I think he might be a police officer in a neighboring town. And he's one of the few fighters we've ever had on any of our shows in New Hampshire that's actually from the state of New Hampshire, which is something we've wanted for quite some time because we do get a fair amount of local press coverage. But one critique we've always gotten from local newspapers and local news affiliates is we would cover more if you had actual New Hampshire fighters on your show. Well, we have not had New Hampshire fighters on our show for the most part because they simply did not exist. Ryan Clark had some amateur fights, wants to turn pro, is tough as nails. And who else is tough as nails? Robert Bricks, who will be fighting on July 30th. Now, because you guys have such a fascination with Robert Bricks, I'll tell you some things about Robert Bricks that I don't know if will enhance his reputation that he has in your minds or humanize him, but he is one of the nicest, kindest, most reliable, honest people you will ever meet in your life. He just also happens to be tough as nails and almost impervious to pain. I've never seen him in anything remotely resembling a boring fight. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite fights that we've ever done was between him and Greg Bono last year in an empty arena show that we live streamed on YouTube. And I turned to one of my partners during the show and I said, I can't believe we just gave that fight away for free on YouTube in front of no audience. The Castleton's roof would have blown off during that because both guys, and I say this liking both guys, their defense was rather deficient that night, but their offense was on, and they both could give it and take it. And Robert Bricks, in the very first fight we ever did with him when he fought Harry Gigliotti, dropped his hands to entice Harry Gigliotti to come forward and hit him so that he could land some shots of his own. He's literally that guy that people say sometimes with hyperbole, oh, he'll eat 3 punches to land 1. That quite literally is the case with Robert Bricks. Never in anything remotely resembling a boring fight and a good guy on top of it. And I'm very excited to see him and Ryan Clark in the ring on July 30th. It's always fun when Robert Bricks is in the ring.
Where did you find him?
Robert Bricks had some amateur kickboxing matches in upstate New York. And I was just perusing some various mixed martial arts and kickboxing websites to see if there's any guys who would be interested in 4-rounders. And that's how I happened to find Robert Bricks. And he's become a staple of Boston Boxing Promotion shows at this point. I don't think too many, if any, have passed since he made his pro debut that he has not been a part of. And I want him on pretty much all our shows moving forward because he's that likable of a guy and that exciting of a fighter.
And I'm just going to pretend I'm going to forget part of the story you just told. Yeah. And I'm just going to pretend that he eats nails for breakfast still. And this is what I was telling Angelo before we had you join us is, and I would assume Robert Bricks is not going to tell me he's the most technical boxer, ever to step in the ring. Right. And so when boxers are like that on the 4-round undercards of club shows, I want a guy who's going to go in there and either get knocked out or knock the other guy out. And that's exactly what our guy Bricks does. And that's why I love him.
But the thing is, he's so durable. I mean, he's had some fights against the likes of Harry Gigliotti where he just could not be wobbled, let alone stopped. So, he's a durable guy on top of everything you just mentioned. And he does take this seriously. I mean, he gets himself in good shape before his fights. So we'll see what he's coming at on July 30th. I don't know what to expect out of Ryan Clark. The one word that people who were more familiar with him in the amateurs have used to describe him is tough, and that's predominantly what I would use to describe Robert Brooks as well. So I'm hoping it's a hell of a fight in the 30th.
I'm definitely looking forward to that. Gray said a lot of the same things too about Robert being such a nice guy and all that stuff, but I don't care. I think he still eats nails for breakfast.
Maybe he does eat nails for breakfast. You know, one thing that is kind of a hallmark of our shows that we do from time to time. One thing I hate about boxing is that you'll see these guys that are always overmatched to build up local heroes, and they're never given the opportunity to fight someone else of their like. We did 2 fights between Robert Brooks and Laquan Lewis, and I don't know if there's 2 more likable guys on the planet who have been part of our shows than Robert Brooks and Laquan Lewis. And we might do something like that again involving those guys as well. You never know.
Yeah, there's some local guys or guys who became local draws whose name popped out immediately for me that never had like tough fights or anything of that nature. So then on August 6th, you guys have a heavyweight on your card, James Lights Out Torney. Did I get that right?
Is his nickname actually Lights Out?
No, I don't know. It's close enough, though.
Close enough. So Jim Torney, actually, as we speak, I think he came back home over the weekend. He was in Deontay Wilder's camp leading up to the now postponed fight with Tyson Fury. Jim Torney, who will be fighting Thomas Hawkins on August 6th at the Castleton in Windham, New Hampshire. Tickets are at boxingnh.com if I have not mentioned that, gentlemen. Jim Torney, a 6'9" orthodox heavyweight with some fluidity in his movement. Sounds quite a bit. Who else is a 6'9" white heavyweight orthodox with some fluidity in their movement? Tyson Fury is. So I gave the Wilder camp a call and said, do you want a guy who checks these boxes? They said, absolutely. So he spent some time with Deontay Wilder in his camp most recently, sparring with Deontay Wilder. And I think that is as good of sparring as Jim Torney can get at this stage of his career. And I also think it served a great purpose for Deontay Wilder with all the similar characteristics Jim has with Tyson Fury. So I'm curious to see what Jim Torney has against Thomas Hawkins, who I do believe is the most stern test of Torney's young professional heavyweight career thus far, and probably the most stern test of his boxing career, period, as despite Jim Torney's natural athletic ability and ability to stand in there with Deontay Wilder in sparring sessions, he only had 4 amateur fights. And he's in his early 30s now, so he wants to move sooner than later. And we'll see what he has against Thomas Hawkins on August 6th. I'm very excited to work with him, a very nice guy.
Similar question. Where did you find James Torney? Like this, I mean, obviously he probably wasn't hard to spot being 6'9", but where did you find him?
I was walking through Chinatown and I saw him. No, I'm kidding.
I was like, wow, okay, yeah, exactly what I thought.
No, he was referred to me by another local fighter who I have a great amount of respect for. And that's how it happened.
So Jim Torney, I want to mention quick a couple of cool things about him. I've seen 3 of his 4 pro fights. This will be his 4th fight in 2021. And Angelo, you'll be happy to know he's kicked off 2021 in Big Punch.
Nice.
Right where he belongs. It wasn't his pro debut, his 2nd fight. But then I watched his fight just a month or so ago in the Dominican. And one of the things that endeared me right away to Jim Torney, not right away, I should say, more endeared me to Jim Torney. Is that the right way to say it? It was a first-round knockout in the Dominican, and Jim was visibly pissed off when he didn't think his opponent put up enough of a fight for him.
That's this guy. Okay, yeah, I remember talking to you about this.
Yeah, so he was like, "Oh, come on." He wanted to beat on him some more. I thought it was awesome. That's exactly what I want from a club heavyweight, and we'll see where he goes from here. He's definitely got the size and like you said, Peter, with that experience to be able to take punches at the highest level in sparring, or he would have been out of there on day one. It says something about the guy. So we'll see what happens from here.
And like I said, Thomas Hawkins is the most stern test he's faced in his career thus far. I mean, you know, these guys are literally moving up a ladder. What happens if you try to jump 3 steps up a ladder, climbing a ladder on your roof? Well, you fall. So Jim Torney, with his limited amateur background, is taking it slow. But I don't expect Thomas Hawkins to give the effort that you described that gentleman in the Republic. I think Thomas Hawkins is coming to pull the upset. I know he's coming to pull the upset. I know he's very confident. So I can't wait to see it. And you mentioned the Big Punch Arena, Tim. You guys are huge for Big Punch Arena. And I must say, it is legitimately on my bucket list to attend a show at the Big Punch Arena one of these days. My good friend Dennis Garachev in San Diego says, Pete, we'll drive over the border. Don't worry, we're going. But I do try to make these shows in the matchmaking a higher quality than what you would see on.
I can't touch that. I can't. No, that's good stuff.
Can I call you out on something, Tim?
Please. Oh gosh, this is great. Yes, please.
I'm not calling you out on it. I'm just going to give you my feelings on it. So I was listening to your podcast a few months back where you and Angelo discussed the most recent Boston Boxing Promotions show. And you said that the show was a little big punchish. And I took initial offense to that comment until I realized that was the 5th show we had done in the pandemic era. 4 of the 5 shows we did during the pandemic era were empty arena shows without the revenue of people purchasing tickets to see the show. And while I took offense to that comment for maybe half a second, I then realized that on the budget we were working with on our 5th show in the pandemic era that we were live streaming to an empty arena, the show may have been a little bit punchish. There was a great fight to kick off the show, a great fight to end the show, and then in between, I did think to myself at least twice, where the fuck did I find this guy? But going back to what I was saying, I do make a concerted effort to make our shows not big punchish, with all due respect to the Big Punch Arena, because I know what that means. And I think that people who buy tickets to our shows are going to see quality competitive boxing each and every time out.
Yep, and I think after hearing what you just said, I think that would be fair for you to be initially feel that way about what I said. And I guess in hindsight, now that I look back on it, you know, the point of the comment was more one of just the pace of the show, the amount of fights on the show. The fact that I can sit down for 5 hours and watch club boxing was what you were doing with some of those shows during the pandemic. And I was like, gosh, this is right in my wheelhouse. And so I brought it back to Big Punch. But yeah, I can see that now. That's fair. That's a fair criticism on your part.
And it's interesting that the pace of those shows, which you guys acknowledged in your podcast, which was fight happens, fight ends, get the next fight in the ring. At the very beginning of the pandemic, in between each and every fight, we had guys come out and spray down the rings and whatnot, for concerns for COVID. But as the pandemic went on, you learn more about the science behind this. And we found better methods or quicker methods, because it's impossible for someone to get COVID from touching a ring rope, particularly when all the guys and officials were tested anyways. We held everything. While in shows during the pandemic, I am proud to say that we did things very responsibly. Everyone was tested. Everyone was cleared. And the very first one, I think 1 or 2 got nixed because they did test positive, but you could literally see the numbers dwindling as we kept doing them. And it was fight happens, fight ends, next fight in the ring. Some people would ask me from time to time, hey, how come you don't do ring entrances? How come you don't do ring music? Well, we do that when we have a party environment of a live rockin' crowd, which we'll have 3 weeks in a row at the Castleton coming up. But considering we did not have the revenue of ticket buying on these shows, there was going to be no resource of mine that wasn't going into the ring. I wasn't going to hire a DJ. I love our DJ, DJ Jen. We weren't going to hire a DJ. We weren't going to hire someone to do lights. None of that was necessary. I wanted,
Yep.
I wouldn't want to have a fighter not have an opportunity to fight on our show because we spent the money that could have been used on their fight on entrances. You know what I mean? So the pace of the show was more done through my desire to see boxing and nothing else, as opposed to anything else. So that's kind of why we had the pace of those shows going that way.
That's a really good point. A lot of what we come to expect from what we see in boxing mostly is to entertain the live crowd that's actually there. If you were to do it solely for TV, it would look different. Anybody who's watched WWE, and I don't even really watch, but I know that they did like these empty venues and the TV product looked a lot different than it did when they had a live crowd. And that's because you entertain a live crowd a lot differently than if it's just TV. So that makes a lot of sense. And I'm happy to hear that you guys, were out here testing and making sure people were safe. And really the point of that, though, is that you were doing empty arena shows and doing what you needed to do to be responsible and still putting these shows on, still delivering. That I don't think, there's a lot of smaller promoters who were like on the bubble of like maybe getting on TV that may not be here today because they weren't able to put things together during the pandemic. So I salute you for that.
We basically took a minor league baseball business plan and adhered it to boxing. If you were to ever listen to a minor league baseball broadcast, it's always like, the top of the third inning is brought to you by Big Bob's Beer Barn in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Make sure you go down to, it's just stupid shit like that. So that's literally what we did. Get the local mom and pop sponsors, throw a few bucks. They see their name on TV or on, a computer screen. The local hero is fighting. The YouTube numbers are in the corner of the screen, so everyone knows how many people are watching, so they see the value of it. And then it was a unique thing as a promoter to check your Instagram later after the show and see countless stories of groups of people and families watching and celebrating and high-fiving while watching on their television sets, which were hooked up to, their YouTube or whatnot. Hopefully they were all in the same social bubble as they were doing that during the height of the pandemic. But it was cool to see that there were a lot of people enjoying the show from the comfort of their own home and celebrating as if they were there when their guy won.
For this show on August 6th, Peter, tell us about the main event here as we wrap up the third show in 3 consecutive weeks. It's amazing.
So the main event that night will be Chris Jacobs taking on Josh Rainieri. Chris Jacobs, I believe, is either 3-1-1 or 4-1-1, coming off a knockout win over Robert Bricks, which is impressive, mind you, because Robert Bricks does not get stopped, particularly in the first round. Taking on Josh Rainieri, who's 4-0 with 2 knockouts. Chris Jacobs and his manager, Carlos Alvarado, are 2 of my favorite people to work with in the Boston Boxing Promotions universe because sometimes you will get fighters saying, I need an easy win. I need a confidence booster. And Chris Jacobs and Carlos Alvarado say, yeah, that guy's undefeated. I want him. On our shows, Chris Jacobs defeated the previously undefeated Harry Gigliotti, the previously undefeated Brandon Higgins, who are fighting each other in a main event on another show. And now Chris Jacobs says, I want to move up a weight class and do the same thing against Josh Rainieri because I think his style suits me. Concurrently, Josh Rainieri's trainer, Ray Hebert, one of my other favorite people to work with in the Boston Boxing Promotions universe, he says, well, if Chris Jacobs thinks he can outbox my guy, I can see why he would think that, but I think my guy's going to stop him. A fight's a fight. Both teams want it, and I'm very excited for it. It's a 6-rounder, and you're going to have one of the most exciting fighters from Southern Massachusetts taking on one of the most exciting fighters from Northern Massachusetts, right on the Massachusetts-New Hampshire border, and I can't wait for it. And also, the co-feature for that show, Brandon Berry is going to take on Travis Castellon in his first ever 10-round fight, which is now for the NABA U.S. title. And I also want to point out on that show, we're going to have a signing of Boston Boxing Promotions I'm very excited for. Amanda Pavone will be taking on Jacob Pavillas. And the female fights tend to always deliver on our shows, and I'm very excited to be working with Amanda Pavone. I've only known her for a few weeks at this point because she signed with us. But, one of my favorite people already on our roster, and I can't wait for her debut under the Boston Boxing Promotions banner to take place August 6th.
Is that listed right on BoxRec? Is this a 4x3 minute round women's bout?
Yes, Amanda Pavone and Jacob Pavillas both want 3-minute rounds. And I've talked about this in other podcasts before, and I know that there are people within the industry that disagree with me on this, but I think that women's boxing should have 3-minute rounds. As the rule stands right now, most states still do 2-minute rounds for women's boxing, but there is an option for 3-minute rounds per an ABC rule if both camps agree to it, which is the case here. I don't think the option should exist. I think they should all be 3-minute rounds. I think that the way in which judges score fights, I think that it knocks them off. I think it really messes with the way they score a fight to only have 2-minute rounds, and that's why you see so many majority decisions and draws in women's boxing. It has never made sense to me that at the open level of national amateur women's boxing, they fight 3-minute rounds, and then they turn pro and they're fighting 2-minute rounds. I think that's silly, and I've heard people argue against it by saying 2-minute rounds are safer than 3-minute rounds, which of course is true, but we all have to recognize that we're all willing participants in a sport that inherently is just not the safest thing in the world. The intent of the sport is to inflict damage on your opponent. So it's still boxing. I'm a proponent of 3-minute rounds. Both girls wanted it. That's what we're going to do.
I love it. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I'm completely with you on everything you just said, but boy, we could have a whole episode just on that. I'm with you. It'll add a lot more as a viewer. I'm excited to see that. I just want to add one point. You mentioned the 23rd is sold out. I'm sure all 3 of these shows will be sold out, and they'll be live streamed on YouTube in case we haven't mentioned that in a little bit in our discussion. I had said on a previous podcast about one of your shows. The first show I saw, BoxRec Gray was live streaming from his cell phone. I think that you had given him the permission to do so, and it was before the pandemic, and it brought me back when I used to go to the upper Midwest local club shows. Lively crowds, rowdy, good, well-matched fights, just a great night of entertainment. And as I've started to watch these fights with viewers back post-pandemic, I think it'll be just as well received as a viewer on YouTube, because I know you're going to have a full house with good fights, and it just brings so much more to the broadcast. I'm really looking forward to these 3 shows live on YouTube. So before we let you go, Peter, anything else that you want to share?
I just want to thank you guys for having me on the podcast. I truly appreciate it. Tim Boxeo, you are a boxing Twitter cult hero at this point, and it's an honor to be and Angelo, great speaking with you as well. I hope the folks check out the shows on YouTube, and if they can attend, there are still tickets available right now for the 2nd and 3rd shows, July 30th and August 6th at boxingnh.com. I do anticipate us having 3 consecutive sellouts. I don't know how many consecutive sellouts we've had at the Castleton and shows in which we've been allowed to have full crowds, but we're going to add 3 more with these 3 shows. I'm certain of it. And a part of it is that our brand has been built up rather well over the past few years. But another thing is that people have been cooped up in their houses for so long with the pandemic that now that the vaccines are rolling out and things are starting to open up, people want to get out of their house and do things. And we hope that we can give people 3 nights of boxing that remind them, hey, you can get together with your friends and family and have a good time, because innately humans are social creatures. And I just want to give people a great time on these 3 shows. I thank you guys for having me on the podcast. And if anyone out there wants to go, boxingnh.com is where you get the tickets. And it's always nice to see when there's people who on Twitter talking about making road trips to see one of your shows. It makes you feel like you're doing something that people look forward to, which is nice.
All right. Thanks a lot, Peter, for coming on. I'm looking forward to this. I have to catch my man Robert Bricks. And we look forward to doing this again with you someday, maybe when you roll out your next string of shows.
I would love to be on the show again. We're going to come back September 24th, and also our annual Thanksgiving Eve show should wrap up our calendar year of 2021. And you never know. We might have something else in between.
No rest. Peter, thanks a lot, man. It was great talking to you. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it.
All right, that was our interview with Peter Czymbor of Boston Boxing Promotions, as you guys just heard. I'm just glad that we got to hear more of the origin story of Robert Bricks, and I look forward to Robert getting win number 1. I feel it inside that Ryan Clark, he ain't ready for what Robert Bricks is bringing.
He has no idea.
On July 30th? It's July 30th.
He's going to be 3 good shows. It'll be fun.
Yeah. What I really like about, and we didn't really mention this, but maybe we should next time. What I really like about what Peter is doing over there, and I guess you should say Boston Boxing in general. I don't know if Peter should get all the credit. Maybe there's a team of people, but and this is my perception. I obviously don't live over there, and maybe we should talk to Gray about this, but it seems like what they're targeting is what you've single-handedly done with Big Punch, and that is to create a brand, an expectation. And it seems like Boston Boxing is creating a sort of brand where maybe the fighters aren't actually what draws people in. And I'm sure that is the case, that the fighters draw them in. But also when you couple that with just what you expect out of Boston Boxing, good, entertaining local fights, guys there, going to war. That is something that I don't know that we have a lot in boxing. And it kind of reminds me of ECW, where you had just these rabid fans in a small region where, yeah, the product maybe is bigger than the region, but what you have in that region is something special. And I think you're kind of doing that. You've spearheaded that with Big Punch, where the mecca of boxing has caught on, even though the mecca of boxing is actually the StubHub Center, now called the Dignity Health Sports Park, which is something that I've said for years, but you've overtaken that.
I'm ready to be Peter's Dwight K. Schrute to Michael Scott from The Office, because there's not a ton of club boxing promoters that were able to not only survive the pandemic, but keep some fighters busy during it. And then before and after the pandemic, selling out local club shows and just put good entertainment out for people that enjoy boxing. And, that's the foundation of the sport and why we're talking about what we're talking about. So it's great.
I know we're nicer
your regular podcast?
On this podcast, and then my regularly scheduled podcast where you may or may not get torched, okay? And so I didn't want to name drop any promoters, but there are promoters who were in that middle ground, that they weren't quite, linchpins of boxing, like Top Rank, but they weren't let's say, bigger than life entertainment.
Yeah.
And they didn't survive the pandemic. Boston Boxing did. And I don't know how they did it, but they did.
And they're going to sell out 3 consecutive shows. It's great to see. It's awesome.
Now, the only thing I'm wondering is how close to Maine is this place? Now, I ask because I legitimately don't know, but the only thing I know about New England, and I'm assuming this is in New England, is Massachusetts and Maine, mostly from being the state that the book takes place in. So I'm just curious where all of this is taking place in relation to perhaps a haunted town. But, we could go on to our next segment, which is we got to plug the Patreon. Some people may have heard about it. Some people may not have heard about it. Can you explain kind of what Patreon is and what we're doing with it?
Answer your question. Just the border of Maine from where Peter's talking about Windham, New Hampshire, not that far. Not that far. Yeah, maybe a couple hours. I'm just off the cuff. Right. Maybe a couple hours.
I ain't going then.
Yeah, thanks. So
Oh,
Let me
a couple
mention
hours.
the
All right,
Patreon
I'll go.
really quick and just provide a little more scope. So the things that potentially brought you here to our podcast, and thanks for listening, everyone. Really appreciate all the feedback we get, the ratings, reviews, the subscriptions. Thank you so much. And one of the things that may have brought you here is just my overall activity of live tweeting club shows on Twitter. And that's not going to change. Nothing will change there. Our podcast that Angelo and I are doing right now will remain where it is. And the live streaming schedule for Stanza that I create for the links to all these shows every single week will always stay where it is as well. And so that's been something I've said from the start, and that's not going to change. Also, we're creating a free Discord community where we can talk about these things when they're live and when they're not live. But I also wanted to create another channel that would be a subscription channel, and that's what Patreon is, if you're unfamiliar. And you can go to patreon.com/Tim Boxeo, and you can see my Patreon page. There's two options for you to subscribe to. One is you can be a 16-year-old debutante from Mexico for $1 and just help feed my addiction, keep all those things that I just mentioned free. Or you can be the UK journeyman with 2 wins and 70 losses. And that costs $4 a month. And you'll get access to my Patreon feed. If you've ever gone to fightnews.com and scrolled through it would be like the club boxing version of that, scrolling through, where you'd see videos, polls, commentary from me, and from time to time, up to 3 times a month, podcasts that will only be released on that Patreon feed. So additional podcasts from there, as well as we'll have live viewing parties once a month where you can join us, and I'll do commentary over a show like we just saw on Sunday, for example, from Big Punch with Chris Lovejoy and DeAndre Savage, something like that. So a bunch of cool benefits for only $4 a month, and lots of more ideas to add to that. I think you'll really enjoy the content. There's probably 12, 13 pieces of content already on there, and I just launched Patreon yesterday. So I made a comment on Twitter. If you can imagine the addiction I have to putting out club content on Twitter, you can imagine in parallel how that'll look on Patreon. So I feel confident you'll get your $4 worth, and I'd love to have you join that community as we continue to build it.
Yeah, so definitely make sure you guys sign up for that. And we will be back. Well, I guess we're wrapping it up. So if you enjoy this podcast, sign up for the Patreon, $1 or $4. Do what you can. But obviously, you guys are diehards. You're going to be in here for $4. Now, if you also should leave a good rating, leave a good review for the podcast. That's how people find the podcast. That's how people learn about this stuff. And for anybody who may be a club boxing fan out there, but it's kind of hard for me to imagine that somebody who's a fan of club boxing does not know who you are, but they can get access to finding out a bit about Tim Boxeo's podcast and all that stuff. So definitely go do that. Hit subscribe if you're not subscribed, if you enjoy this. Follow Tim Boxeo on Twitter, where you get all this content. You know, obviously it's not going to be as much probably as the Patreon, but you'll get all this content, stay up to date, find out when the new episodes
Another great
drop.
week, Angelo. Thank
Tim,
you so much.
any final
Always
words?
have a blast, and thanks a lot to everybody for listening.
All right. Thank you guys so much. We'll be back.